I think in the previous critical thinking workshop, we went over the elements of critical thinking. So what I wanted to focus on today is the universal intellectual standards. It's all in this. It's also online. Well, I think as an add-on to the email, I'll provide you the website so you don't have to rely on these. And then the third part of the critical thinking model for Elder and Paul is the traits. So, for the universal intellectual standards, Elder and Paul would say, these are the universal intellectual standards. So, we have, for example, for clarity. So, when you are talking about assessment in the classroom in particular, it's very important to attend to these intellectual standards. I love clarity. Could you elaborate further on that point? Could you express that point in another way? Could you give an illustration? Could you give me an example? And this is actually what CI will go directly to. But it goes through a lot of these standards. Accuracy. Is that really true? How many times do we teach something that we find out, sometimes within weeks, medical field, it's amazing, but within weeks we'll find out, no, well, that was based on whatever, not enough of a longitudinal basis for the study or whatever it is. How many times do we challenge a student to say, I'm going to teach you this, but your job is to ask yourself, is that true? Is that true? How can we check it? How do we find out? How do we find out if it's true? I'm thinking of those logical syllogisms that we learned in logic class, where we prove that all men are humans, all humans are whatever, and it ends up that all humans are aliens, because we use the logical process, but it isn't necessarily true. Precision. Could you give me more details? Could you be more specific? Relevance. How is that important? How is that connected to the question? How does it bear on the issue? Depth. And that's a huge issue, depth. We do live in the Wikipedia world. We do live in the modern political and other world, philosophical world, where I guess because is a good enough answer for a lot of us, right? I would not expect that's my answer to my 15-month-old child, just because. I'm sure I'll say that at some point. But it really isn't the way that we want to educate each other or others. Breadth. So, depth, how does your answer address the complexities? It's a complex world. There's not too many simple answers, a lot of simple questions. Breadth, do we need to consider another point of view? Logic, does it really make sense logically? And then there are others. Significance, is it the most important question considered? Is it a central idea? Are we getting to that pithy answer that we need? And fairness. A lot of this comes out to you have a vested interest in the subject matter. Are you advancing a viewpoint or advancing something that you should? So those are the intellectual standards. And this is very important for you to know. It's very difficult in one class to do all the elements. It's very difficult to do all the standards, much less even get to the traits. I would say in your practical application, you want to pick one or two. Clarity is a wonderful one to do. It seems to be we live in a world that is fogged over in terms of assessment. But CI. CI is a method that I think the two of you who are going or will go to the conference, at least I think you remember the CI method from the conference, is a method really to get to some element of clarity. And what the CI method does is provide clarity and deeper understanding of a concept or a construct. I love the term construct because a concept is constructed. So when we talk about, in psychology, the construct of the superego, id, ego, superego, it's probably not a valid construct in research nowadays anyway, but if you think about it, that's a construct. And when you're thinking about that concept, you're constructing your knowledge of it. And it's a method also to show proof of reading through writing and discussion. So let me ask this rhetorical question. How do you know that students are reading the material, whether textbook or otherwise, and are ready and come into class prepared, having read everything you know that they should read.
I'm waiting for the answer.
So we go up there and we say, okay, let's talk about the superego, because someone explained that to me. I know that it was in the chapter assignment yesterday, or a week ago. You should have read it already because you've read the whole book before you started classes. And so you get that long gap, silence. And then there's usually one or two people in the room who have done the reading or have some contextual knowledge and are able to answer the question or get close to it and you're like, oh, that's so close to the edge of them, and you do all that. Well, the CI method is really an effective way to demonstrate proof of reading, which is so essential to critical thinking, through writing and discussion. How do you prove reading? Through writing. And I think philosophically, as an institution and as a society, or an educational society, we need to get to the point where we're more comfortable with people writing. CI stands for state the concept in a sentence or two, elaborate the concept in your own words, exemplify the concept by, too many by's, giving concrete examples, and illustrate the concept with a picture diagram or analogy. So we understand this. This is the technique I'm highlighting for this presentation as a method of assessment. You can use it as an evaluation, but it's preferable as an assessment. Using the CI technique, clarify the concept of learning. We're clear. State the concept in a sentence or two. Write down in a sentence or two what you define the concept of learning as. Being whatever. Then we're going to ask you to get into groups and start elaborating that, into partners probably, elaborate that, and then we're going to go through this exemplify, and then we're going to go through illustrate. But right now, a sentence or two about your definition of the concept or construct of learning. Now the point behind this, as you're finishing that up, is you can do this for any subject or concept that you teach in your class. I would say for biology, you could use a concept of evolution definition, although that's a pretty huge thing. You could do that in biology class. What is in the sentence if you the definition of biology? But it needs to be done in writing, because what that is showing is that whether the student has or has not demonstrated proof of reading through their writing. You've all done that, right? So you partner up, and what you're going to do is elaborate the concept in your own words with your partner. So, for example, John Smith here will say, my definition of learning is, and you're going to say, could you elaborate in other words what that is? So you're going to want them to branch out from that, and then you flip it. Your partner's going to do the same thing. Okay. So go for it. I want you to think about what is happening, because there's a madness behind my method here. And the madness behind my method is that what you'll notice as we go through these steps is that you're attending to these standards. What have we done? You come up with a personal definition, which may or may not include an accepted standard or accepted definition within the field. However, you're providing more clarity. You're getting more precise. If there's something way out there, like, I don't know, some learning is a process of putting a book on your head and transmitting knowledge through osmosis, that will probably get weeded out. Will probably get weeded out through the process. You're really getting into some of these things, but not to a great extent, but you're getting into them. Now, the next step in this, and what's really cool about this, is the next one. When we elaborate it. That can be done in a lot of ways. If you're teaching online, how would it be done?
Having online?
Yeah.
Having people respond to each other's
Discussion.
Yeah, discussion points. Yeah.
It can be done in different modalities. It can be done in writing. You know, back in the day when we were writing back in the 1900s, we were writing, it'd be long letters, and it would go back and forth, and people would have that, so it can be done in a lot of different modalities. It just doesn't have to be this way. I imagine that some very smart programmers could probably come up with a program that would do the same thing. So, exemplify. Now the next step. You state it, and you elaborate it. Now you're going to exemplify. Give an example. Another example would be if a child's learning. Learning is, for example, a child learning how to ride a bike. They first get on the bike, they learn how to pedal with training wheels, they learn how to balance, they acquire the skill of balancing and steering, they look at the older kids and see how they're doing things, you have a parent who's coming. That's the process of learning. So you're going to exemplify by saying, for example, your definition of learning, for example. You're going to give examples of why your definition of that concept of learning. Exemplify it. Use an example for it. Okay? There you go. So we're going to do so we need to come back. I've done a few times the CI method for a definition of learning. And I think probably we're getting to a point when you talk with each other about your definitions of learning, you engage in that dialectic process, the dialectic process of upward spiraling of knowledge. You say this, I say this, we come to agreement, and then, that whole system way of doing it. But I'm thinking that the vast majority of people here in their definition of learning probably has something like a change in knowledge, capabilities, attitude, value, beliefs, whatever it is, because we've done this work. But change is very important to that, because learning is going from one state to another state. So, I wanted to get that little aside in. The next step is probably the most difficult step, which is illustrate the concept with a picture, a diagram, or analogy. So I'm going to provide you with mine. I hope I don't take yours. But mine is, learning is much like a cross-country trip with a lot of people in the car. Why? Because it's a group process. It involves change from one place to another. Not everybody's going to be driving the car at the same time, one person isn't going to be driving the car the whole way. So students will change places, leadership will change. You have to learn this to navigate, skills of navigation, pre-GPS, I guess, and skills of navigation.
Yeah.
But you need to learn those attendant skills and knowledge, skills, abilities, and attitude. You're going to learn, your attitudes are going to change when you go from Florida to California, a cross-country trip. So that's my analogy.
I like that.
Okay. So what is your analogy?
I don't have one. I like that.
So here we go. I want to wrap up with this other example of another technique you can use in the classroom, either as an evaluation, it's very poor evaluation, but as an assessment. The 5 whys. The 5 whys, evaluation assessment method. If you want to get to the depth of any subject or any concept, please scratch out 4, put in 5. Have the person, ask the person why 5 times. It's like the kid, why is the sky blue? Because this. Why? Because of this. Why? Because of this. Why? Because of this. If you can get to the 5th, or even the 4th why, most people will, excuse my phrase, crap out after 3. But, if you can get to the 4th, great. If you can get to the 5th level, more power to you, because you really thought in some level of detail. We have a meeting coming in. I do want to say, conclusion, hopefully you've gotten a working and useful definition of assessment and evaluation. While I'm talking to you about your evaluations, because you are evaluating it.
That's right, huh?
You have an introduction on level assessment, universal intellectual standards, and being able to apply CI and the hidden 5 why into your teaching. Thank you very much. Fill out your evaluations, and thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Yes.